Hi, my name is Matthew Kelly. In this video, I'm going to go over how to make a simple collage using Inkscape. So the first step to start out with is to format the document properties. So if we press Control-Shift-D, that'll bring up the document properties tab over here. And then I like this is going to be an 8 by 10 collage, so I'm going to set this to be inches landscape, and then I'll make the width 10 and the height 8. Over here I usually like to see the border on top of the drawing for this type of collage so that when you bring photos in, this line here will show up on top of the photos. The next thing you're going to need is some pictures. So what I've done here is made a folder that has some pictures of woodworking projects that I've done this year. And I'm not going to put all these in, but it's useful to then have this folder to pull from. So whenever you see photos coming in, they're just being pulled by dragging and dropping off of that folder. So I'll start by dragging in a photo of some tops. Now let's look at the import options we have. We can either embed the photo or link it, and this is sort of the most important setting here. If you link the file, it means that it doesn't actually copy the data from the photo into the Inkscape file. It instead just tells the computer to open the file on the disk somewhere. This tends to be a lot faster if you're only going to be using it on one computer, but if you want to be able to move the file around, then you should embed it. If you embed it, the file size will be a lot bigger and it'll take longer to load, so there's a trade-off there. For my purposes, I'm going to link it to keep things fast since I'm not going to be doing this on multiple computers. The image DPI, I would suggest leaving that as from file, and this rendering is just for what you see while you're working on it. It doesn't affect the output of the image. So I usually just use none, but if you have a slower computer, you might want to use optimized speed, or if you want everything to be really pretty, then you might want smooth. So those settings are good for now. Okay, now we see the image comes in here and it's huge compared to the size of the drawing, so we need to shrink it down. So first, let's move our screen so that we can see the whole image. So in Inkscape, if you just use the scroll wheel, you move the screen up and down. But if you hit Control and then do the scroll wheel, you can zoom. And if you hit Shift and scroll, you can go left and right. So while I'm making the collage, you'll see me move the image around, and that's how I'm doing it, is just either Control and Shift and scroll. So now we can do that, and we get the image to the middle of our screen. Next, I'm going to click over here and nothing is selected, but now if I click on the image, I see these little tabs show up around the corner. Now if I just start pulling on these tabs, we get all sorts of image distortion, and that's generally undesirable in a collage. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo those changes. And what I'm going to do is hold down both Control and Shift. Now when I do this, it requires it to scale both axes of the image the same so you don't distort the image. So this is almost always desirable for collages. So now I'm going to zoom back in, and we see now our photo of some tops is the right size. So now, just some basic Inkscape stuff. I would also highly suggest going to the help and then tutorials and just do the basic tutorial. That'll help a lot with sort of learning all these different keyboard shortcuts. But for now, I'll just tell you the ones that I'm going to use. So if I click on this again, you see the arrows change. This lets me rotate the image. So right now I can rotate this by some arbitrary amount. It's often convenient to rotate it by exactly 90 degrees. So for that, you can use these arrows up here. Or you can hold down Control and Shift, and then the image rotates by 15-degree increments all the way around the circle. Okay. Let's see, the next thing we might want to do is align this with the edge. So if I hold down, if I click the image and hit Control Shift A, it brings up the alignment tab. And I want to go relative to the page. And then you can just click these different buttons. So let's align it with the left part of the document and the top. So now this image is in the corner. So that looks pretty good, what we want there. Okay. Next, let's bring in another image. Here's a good one. This is an image of some logs, cherry logs actually, that I cut down and I'm going to mill up for some future projects. And I'm going to do those same steps I did last time, just a little bit faster. Let's put this one down in the lower corner here. One of the nice things about Inkscape is that Since it's only storing sort of viewports into the photos, you can rescale these photos as many times as you want while you're working on the project. So I could go, up and back down. Oh, I skewed the picture. I'm gonna have to go Control Shift when I do that. And each time I do this, it's a lossless change because it doesn't actually resample the image until you save it. So that's really convenient for at the end of the collage when you want to sort of do fine adjustments in all of the photos. Okay, I actually made this too small now, so I'm going to make this go back up, and now we're good. Let's pick another photo over here. Here's a photo of a cedar bowl. Oh, it's huge. Okay, back to making it small. Okay, and this looks like a decent picture to put up in the corner here. So we'll do that. And here is another one that shows a small vase that's under construction. Oh, again, I have to Control Shift before I do that, otherwise all hell breaks loose. So I'm going to make this one just a little bit bigger than these other images so that it goes sort of behind it. So now, one thing we'll get to here is these other images I aligned right to the edge, but you can have the image go off it, and then when you export it, it'll just sort of cut the image there. Now the next thing is you see how this image is clearly on top of the others. So by default, when you bring in an image, it's going to come in as the top of the image. Each sort of object in your document has what's called a depth or a z-value. But in a collage you often want to change what photos are on top. So a simple thing is if you hit the home button, it takes whatever object is selected and brings it to the top. And similarly, pressing end will drop an object all the way to the bottom. Now, if you want to just make small changes, you can hit page up and page down to do single changes. And these commands are really helpful once you get a lot of photos to sort of get the order of the images right. So for right now, I think I want this one to be all the way on the bottom. So I'll drop that down. So now you can see here where the border on top of the drawing is helpful. Next, let's bring in a picture of my lathe. This should be fun. Okay, so now in this image, let's introduce a new concept. So all these other images sort of had nice borders around them for stuff we want, but this one, we don't really want to see like the trash and all the stuff over here. So let's look at how to do cropping to put an image in the middle of the photo. Cropping a photo in Inkscape is at first significantly harder than it is in most photo editing programs, but it makes a lot of sense once you're used to it. So instead of having a crop option, what it does is you just make an arbitrary shape, put it on top, and then you what's called clip the bottom image to match the top. So the simplest is to do a rectangle. So here I clicked on the rectangle tool. You can also bring that up by pressing F4. And then with the rectangle you draw it by doing two opposite corners and holding down. Okay, now I've from previous things opened up set the properties of the rectangle so that it's transparent, but let's look at how to do that. So I'm going to click on the rectangle to get selected and then hit Control Shift F. That's going to bring up the fill and stroke panel. Then looking at here, the fill is sort of what's happening in the center of the rectangle, and the stroke is what's happening on the border. So right now there's a little X for the stroke, so that means that there's no border. So let's put a border on it just for demonstration purposes. So now we see that the stroke, there's a thin black line. I'll make it wider here so we can see what, actually, so now you can see it more clearly. And then you can change the color. So so up here, so this is an HSL. So right now it's like, oh, why is the color not changing? Because the saturation's off. So you really have to sort of mess with all of these bars at the same time. But now, once this is the case, I can change the color like that. So I actually liked it black, so I'm going to just turn the saturation off, and I'm going to put the stroke back down to 2, I think looks good. Okay, now the fill is what's happening in the middle. So if I hit the X, it goes away and it's just transparent. But it's sometimes useful to be able to see that. So I'm going to make it go back to that nice blue color. So I'm going to click on blue here and then set the saturation up a little bit higher and ramp up the lightness and wiggle these around till I get a nice color that I like. Now you see how it's not transparent? That's what's this last one called alpha. So fully transparent, fully opaque, we can put it more in the middle, and then we can adjust the slider bars and get something there. That's a nice blue. Okay, so now we have a rectangle. Ultimately this rectangle is going to disappear, so it doesn't really matter what color it is, but it's fun to play around. Okay, now let's look at how to actually crop the image with this. So I'm going to hold this rectangle and move it over this. Now I can do a few things. So notice that the rectangle corners are rounded. If you want a sharp corner, like in most typical crops, then you would do this button to make corners sharp, and it goes away. Now, to get these options to come up if you're just out of the blue, you need to click on the rectangle, but you'll see they're not here. That's because you've selected it as a general object. If you want to modify its specific properties as a rectangle, then you need to hit F4 or the rectangle options, and now when I click on it, I get those rectangle things. Now one thing you can do is type in a radius for a circle for the rounded corners, and I usually like rounded corners. You can also hit Control Shift and this circle in the corner, note that's different than the squares that you use to create it, and drag it down, and then you get rounded corners. So I usually like rounded corners, something in there, let's say. Now I'm going to hit Escape to unselect and get out of the rectangle tool, and then F1. So you see right here I have the little rectangle tool. If I hit F1, it changes to a selecting tool. The selecting tool then makes it easy to move it around. So I'm going to start over here and say let's go right above the trash here, and then on this side let's drop this down so that we see some of the lathe chisels in the corner there. That looks good. Now you'll notice this radius actually changed a little after I selected it. So see how the radius is getting distorted as I move the image in, and then when I let go it snaps back to being a nice symmetric curve. That's a really important feature, and it's controlled by these little tabs up here. So forget which of these. So the stroke width is this one, and rectangle rounded corners this. Usually I want all these off, but sometimes there'll be places where you want to turn them on. In this case it doesn't matter too much. Okay, so now we have the shape we want to crop. So we want to have the underlying image crop to match this overlying shape. So to do that, I'm going to click the bottom image, then this is important, hold down Control and Shift, and then click the top image. So now I have a pair of images selected. Next you can go up to the top here and do Object, Clip, Set, or what I find easier is to right click in the middle of both images, and then all the way at the bottom it says Set Clip, and we'll do that. And those are the same command, just two different places to find it. And now you see we've cropped the underlying image to the shape that we put on top of it, and that works with any in Inkscape. Now this is itself treated as an image, and we can do the same sort of scaling operations we would have done before. So let's put this top picture, or the lathe, right sort of underneath in between these other two lathe pictures. There we go. That looks good. And now you see the rounded corners that sort of have a nice look over it like that. And our collage is starting to come together now. Let's bring in another picture. Okay, next let's bring in a more artsy picture I took of a hand plane that I was working with to sort of clean up a block of oak. So sort of the same steps as before, and this is sort of a nice image, so I'm going to have this be our bottom corner. So I'm going to get into that alignment tab by hitting Control Shift A, clicking that image, and then dropping it down to the corner. Let's make it a little bigger. Okay. Next I'll pull in a picture of a slab table that I was working on. So this shows sort of two pieces of oak with a bunch of clamps. It's kind of cool looking. Okay. Let's set this in the background here. So now that I've clicked it, that's about where I want it, but I don't want it over top of all these other images. So I'm going to click it and hit page down to drop it down, and you see it goes down below each layer. I could also hit home to bring it back up to the top, and end to drop it all the way to the bottom. Now that it's under those, I can sort of rescale it to see how big I actually want the image to be. So here I'm seeing that it's actually sort of kind of awkwardly fitting in there. So let's bring this back up to the top and try to do another kind of cropping option to it. So let's actually do that same rectangle thing again. So I just selected the rectangle tool here. You could also hit F4 and then 2 corners, and we get the same presets that we had from the last rectangle. So now I'm going to hit Escape and then F1 to get my selectors back. Select both, set clip, and now we have a cropped image. So now it looks a little bit nicer, and I'm actually going to put this over top of some of these other images now. Let's see, that looks good there. Okay, let's bring in a little bowl to fill that. Little bowl is not so little when it's imported. Okay, there we go. And this image you can see is sort of rotated, so let's just pivot this around. In it goes. Now I think I want this one to be cropped as well, so let's do that. You see in this case I let it snap to the corners, and I'll select that and set clip. And now I can use that to sort of cover up the little hole in the drawing that we had there. And I'll sort of intentionally make it not aligned with that, just artistic settings there. Next, let's bring in a picture of some walnut shelves. Okay, they're again rotated. This time let's rotate them using the rotate tool up here. And we'll do again this crop. Now you see how the corners are all tiny here because I'm zoomed out, so let's actually delete that and make this a reasonable size first so we can keep our corner somewhat consistent. I think I squished a little there, so I'm going to undo that and try again. Okay, let's see. This looks like a pretty good place for this to go. Okay, so now let's do our rectangle. There we go. And we'll set that clip, cropping it, and now here we go. Pretty good. Actually, let's make it even indecision here. So actually what I'm going to do is I actually want this to go all the way to the bottom so I can put it here, but I don't want there to be sort of the white space from that corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to undo the clip. So I'm going to right click and hit release clip, and now I get my rectangle back. I can simply drag the rectangle off the bottom, select both again, and then set the clip, and now I have that pointy corner back on the bottom but a curved one on the top. And then I'm going to Control Shift A so I can align it with the bottom of the image. Yeah, that looks good, and then I think I'm going to Control Shift to bring it back just a little smaller and resize it. There we go. Let's next do, this is sort of a little stone inlay I was working on with some malachite beads. And this looks like it might be a good fit right in there. So again, we'll do our little crop. Let's see if we can drop it right in here. Looks pretty good there. Okay, I need a long skinny photo now. So here's a good long skinny photo that we can do of some slabs of apple that I have that I cut up for drying. So let's look now at this. So let's start, instead of a rectangle, let's do a slightly different shape. Let's start with a long ellipse. So what I'm going to do is I've now hit this, the ellipse tool, which is you can also get by hitting F5, and I'm going to click and draw a long skinny ellipse. And then I'm going to rotate this. Actually, let's see. Let's rotate the image. So get those logs horizontally and line those up. This might not actually work. We might have to go back to a rectangle, but this is fun to play with at least. Okay, so now we have sort of a nice ellipse around our logs. Let's set the clip and see how that works. Let's see, does that fill in our image here nicely? Yeah, sort of. Let's put this on top of it. Make it a little bit bigger. Okay, that works. Maybe not the best artistically, but we'll roll with it. Okay, we have a few more photos left and then we're going to be all set. So, this is another photo we got to rotate around here. So this is a necklace rack and some small vases. This looks like it'll fit in here decently. Let's see, and I want to crop this. So let's actually try doing a more freeform crop here. This maybe can come to bite me in the butt. Let's see if I can make this work. So I'm going to do a Bezier curve here. So once I get to the last one, I just clicked in that circle. Now we have a connected polygon. Now I wonder if I can do this to set a clip. I'm not sure here. Oh, we can. Sweet. Okay, this might actually not be the best thing, but that's how you can make a crazy shape object. Like if I wanted to do something crazy and put it in the middle here, I could do that. Oh, that actually is kind of cool. Maybe we'll keep it. Oh, sweet. Okay, I guess we are going to put this up here. Planning on the fly here. It breaks our rounded corners aesthetic, but that's okay. Okay, next let's bring in a picture of one of my workbenches in the basement here. This is a pretty excellent, it's an old farmhouse with a nice dirt floor. It works out. I got the bench grinder for the lathe tools and some other small things there. That looks good. So actually what I'm going to do is just blow this picture up a little bit to cover up these holes and then just drop it all the way to the bottom of the image. So now it's just there in the background. So I can sort of wiggle this around now until it is in a nice place. And then rescale it. We sort of use the other images as the viewport. Okay, I need something to go there next. Okay, for that image I'm going to take a picture of wood from the wood shed that we have. Oh, that's flipped upside down, so let's rotate it twice. There we go. And get that to a reasonable size. Now I think for this image I'm going to sort of plan on having it go over a lot of these ones but then out on the edge. So I'm going to do a crop but have it go off so I have sharp corners on one side. I think that should be about the right shape. Select both, set the clip, drop it in, and then scale it back until we're the right size. I think we need to make this a little bit smaller. Go up like that. And I think this image then needs to be just a little bit bigger. Okay, I think we've covered all of our white space. This might not win any awards for being aesthetically appealing, but it's a bunch of pictures put in a collage, so we'll call it good. Okay, so the next step here is to save the image, which we can do by hitting Control-Shift-S, and it'll bring up a little dialog. We'll hit save. and then we want to export it to an image. So this is where it actually then will sample and sort of rasterize this again. So what we're going to do is export PNG image, and here we want to do the page, which is that black line again, and see it as the right ratio. We can do our deep dots per inch, so 400 is way high enough for any printer, but that makes it so that you can, zoom in. So you could even make this higher if you wanted to go nuts. You could go 500 or 600. Let's do 600 just for fun. So this is again going to be way higher than what you would ever print, but it means that if you have it on a computer screen, you can then zoom in, and any images that were higher resolution and zoomed down small, you'll get at their full at the higher resolution still. But that'll be limited. If you put in a coarse image, it'll still be coarse. Okay, and that's an okay name, I guess. Let's export it as something else. Let's go to desktop, and we'll say 2016 woodworking.png. Okay. And now the tricky thing, it's like stupid user interface. You actually have to click export down here after going through the follow dialog box. That screwed me up like many times when I've been doing this stuff. So this is a huge image that actually takes a little bit of time to export. And while that's happening, let's go find it. Okay, so it is now successfully exported, and we can open it up in a photo viewer to see how that looks. So here's our final collage. So let's make this full screen, and then we can do Control minus and zoom out, and we get a nice rectangular circle, so you can see, or rectangle. So we've cropped it along the edges, and I don't think we have any white background. So now this is a nice image you can go and print. So I think that's the end of the tutorial. Feel free to leave questions in the comments. I'll go through and answer them, and I hope that this was helpful.